Hope you're all having fun, because we are. I'm Alex Kivelstadt, and you're watching 111 Minute TV. Next up, Balcones Whiskey Show with James Goad.
Hi, out there. I'm James Goad, and I am here with Balcones Distilling out of Waco, Texas, by way of Alameda, California, where I live. I've been asked to come out here and support my dear friends from 111 Minna, which I can think of as a seminal institution here in San Francisco, and I know that they're very thankful for those that made donations, and the GoFundMe page is still up to keep this wonderful art institution going. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the brand that I work for, which is Balcones, and then talk a little bit more about my relationship with 111 Minna, and we're going to make a cocktail that we put together, just a simple little modern classic. And then maybe if we've run out of mileage, we'll open it up to some questions. And if you guys have got questions out there, if you throw them up, I think these guys are able to throw them back at me in real time, and I will do my best to give you facts about the brand. But at any rate, again, I'm James Goad. I've been with this company for just over a year now. Before that, I worked in bars and restaurants in San Francisco for 20 years. And I have known some of these guys from 111 Minna for as long. At any rate, let's get into the brand. This is Balcones. This is out of Waco, Texas. So Central Texas Distilling, about an hour and a half south of Dallas, about an hour and a half north of Austin, just to kind of put it in perspective. These guys got into business to make American single malts, 11 years plus now. And while they were waiting for those to barrel up, their American single malt, they started experimenting, and they made this guy, which is Baby Blue. And that's what we're going to use for the cocktail that we get to in just a bit. So this Baby Blue is incredible. This is, it was the first legal whiskey to be produced in Texas since Prohibition. And it's 100% blue corn. There's not a whole lot of them out on the market, and even fewer that are all grain to glass. This company is independently owned, and none of these are chill filtered. So this one comes in at 92 proof. It's 100% blue corn grown in Texas. This is the Baby Blue, and it's about a minimum about 9 months in barrel. So big, rich, buttery, lots of agave notes at the top of it. A delicious sipper, and really elevates any cocktail that it goes into. One of the newer to the bunch is this guy. This is our 4-grain mash bourbon. So we call this pot still bourbon. Everything that we do is pot distillation, but we chose to call this one pot still bourbon to sort of differentiate from column distillation or continuous distillation that is out there. This one is made from blue corn again, rye, wheat, and barley. So this is our little bourbon, American oak, charred, minimum 2 years. We did an update to our Baby Blue, which is that guy right there. And this is True Blue. So this is a minimum of 2 years in barrel. We've upped it, and it's 100 proof. And again, this is 100% blue corn whiskey. About 2018, we released this guy. This is our rye whiskey, which is incredible. So this is 100% rye. Mash bill is 100% rye. It's 100 proof, and it's a combination of Texas rye and then German specialty rye. And the rye that they use in Germany, they kind of build like you'd build a stout mash, and we do a crystal and chocolate roast on it. We malt it, ship it back over, and then we ferment and distill at the distillery in Waco. So big chocolatey leather tobacco, green chilies, red chilies. It's kind of like New Mexico Christmas, but it's an incredible rye whiskey, and unlike anything else out there. This is the thing that they are most proud of. This is their big flagship. This is their Texas American single malt. This is made from 100% Scottish malted barley. This is Golden Promise, coming from the Highlands of Scotland, from the Simpson family. And this has been a huge medal winner for these guys. This has won double gold in San Francisco twice. It won in 18 again. And this company, we also won Master Distiller. I didn't have anything to do with that. Jared Himstead won Master Distiller of the Year in 2018. And these guys continue to innovate with new single malts. We have a new single malt that's going to launch for us here in California in September, called Lineage, that we'll get to. It's going to retail for around $39.99, which is pretty impressive. So these guys constantly push the envelope of what they're able to achieve and still keep the price points accessible. So this is kind of the core line. We also do a single barrel program with our corn and our rye and our barley, and we do limited releases throughout the year, of which also includes some rum that we do. It'll be happening in a few months. That's Blackstrap and Barbados molasses. So this is Balcones. Something cool to kind of note about Balcones, and one thing that makes it special, in addition to it being delicious, Texas weather, which I learned when I joined the company, is incredibly volatile in Central Texas, where it can swell up to 80s and 90s and back down to 50s over the course of a day. It can snow one day and be sunny and hot the next day. What that does to their whiskeys is it keeps their barrels in constant flux, so they can accelerate maturation with their whiskeys. So stuff that we're doing for 2 years in barrel, they really feel like they're getting 4 years of barrel life out of. The cool thing about that for these whiskeys is you can keep all of your grains really crisp and in the forefront, and then you get really good barrel continuity in the back end. So they're all really highly aromatized. They're really rich. Pot distillation, again, is what we do. Doing classic or doing traditional pot distillation keeps all the fattier matter intact for these whiskeys. So they're really fleshy, they're really alive, and really organic in that way. There's no preservatives and additives. This is all just char color coming out of the barrels. And again, that's the volatility of Central Texas weather. So these are some of the whiskeys that we do. Again, been distilling for about 11 years. I think I'm going to get into making a cocktail. So we put together a cocktail for some kits that went out on behalf of some people that were, or for some people that were very nice enough to donate for 111 Minna. And we kind of did a little, easy version of the old Gold Rush cocktail, which is sort of a modern classic now. It was created at Milk and Honey in New York a number of years ago, but people are really familiar with it. So got a little bit of rich honey syrup that we steeped in a little bit of mint just to kind of play on the aromatics and the baby blue, which is what we're going to be using. And then we're going to do a little bit of fresh lemon juice. Here's old baby blue. And then we're going to shake it up and pour it into a glass. So I'm going to grab a mixing tin. It's been a few years since I bartended, but I think I can figure it out. Let's start with this. So let's do a little bit of baby blue. For this one, we're going to do 1.5 ounces of baby blue. Again, this is our 100% Texas blue corn whiskey. Put that guy in there. Baby blue. To that, we're going to add some lemon juice. So let's do 3/4 ounce of fresh lemon juice. There we go. So that's going to go in there. And then we're going to do a little bit of honey syrup that we prepared ahead of time. And this guy has a little bit of mint that's been steeped in. So that's really all you need. It's that simple. This is just a riff on the old classic 19th century sour. No egg whites in this one, but a little honey, lemon, and some rich corn whiskey. There we go. So far, so good. And then we'll strain this one out. Add a little bit of lemon on top just to release some of the essential oils out of the lemon itself and kind of highlight the acid. There we go. So this is the Gold Rush using Balcones Baby Blue whiskey. Any questions coming out so far? Anybody have any questions for me? I know I kind of blasted through that, but if anybody's got a question, I can field that. Yeah, so I won't say how I know Michelle, but I've known Michelle for 20 years. And I've known some of these guys, Dave, peripherally for about as long, being in the industry too. So I moved to San Francisco in the mid-90s, and I started working at beautiful Muriel's Trophy. I got some waving over there. I thought I was doing something wrong. I started working at Muriel's Trophy Room in the late 90s and then kind of moved into restaurants and then kept going with that. And then I started working for Balcones. I worked for another company before that, but we won't talk about that. And I started working for Balcones, and we've done a number of events in the last year with 111 Minna and some cocktails. And we've done some tastings. And hopefully, if everybody is good little girls and boys, we'll be allowed to come back out and play again. And then we will be able to do some of these events that are non-virtual, and we can all drink some whiskey together. What else you got?
What makes our product particularly special? What departments? Is it just the Texas temperature? Is it something else?
I think it's a lot of care that goes into the whiskey itself. So everything with Balcones, as far as what makes it special, is everything about the whiskey is really just layering, and it's creating complexity, nuance, and depth. So, if you take Baby Blue, for instance, it's 100% blue corn, something they found out when they started experimenting with corn alternatives instead of using yellow dent corn, which is traditionally what you'd use to make bourbons or corn whiskeys. They started experimenting with blue corn and realized that it had more oiliness in the maize. It also had more fermentable sugars in there, more glucose. But those oily components in it gave it more depth, more body, and more texture. So if you're doing something against the Texas sun or working with the Texas sun, and you're barreling it for a limited amount of time without having it be too young or too thin, I think that blue corn gives it this big round bottom or big sort of bassy notes to it. Pot distillation is another thing that plays a heavy factor in what they do. When you're pot distill rather than continuously distilling or Kofi stills or column stills, you keep intact all your fattier molecular matter, all your congeners, just all the heavy fleshy matter that's in there. All that translates to flavor and depth. And then, pot distillation, the weather kind of plays a huge part in it as well. And it's just a lot of care that goes into making these whiskeys and creating them.
What's your favorite cocktail to make with each of these?
With each of them, that's a lot of things to ask. Single malt, my favorite cocktail to make with the single malt is a glass with a big cube of ice, and then you just pour it in there, and then you drink it. I like that one a lot. Baby Blue, I think is really impressive with citrus cocktails. It works well with spirit forward stuff too, but I think it really showcases once you start getting into, adding lemon or adding citrus or really adding tropical fruits in there too, because there's a lot of sort of tropical compounds in there. Something else to kind of backtrack that makes it special too is they don't chill filter. So chill filtration is sort of an archaic step, I think, at this point, but it's a cosmetic step, and it's another level of filtration that you do with whiskey. These guys don't do that. When you don't filter or fine out in that step, you keep all that fattier matter that I keep coming back to intact. So all of this builds depth and layer. And these whiskeys, when you open them up, the more air that gets into them, the more that they really start to open up and fill the room. Like this whiskey, when you open it up, it is big, rich, buttery movie popcorn. There's a lot of agave notes in the top of it too. And then you kind of get into all these beautiful wood spices that are bright once you get into it. So they're just incredible whiskeys on their own. They're great with cocktails. This rye, like I said, is really incredible. This a little bit goes a long way with this whiskey. It loves Amaro, so anything bitter or grippy, it tends to leach out all these wonderful coffee notes and espresso notes that are in there from doing that crystal and chocolate roast. It's kind of the same way that, again, that you would build stouts. So if you're doing a chocolate stout and you were doing crystal roasts on it, or chocolate roasts on it rather, you would get just that, those big chocolate notes, and they come through on this. So it's kind of surprising the different things that you add to it will bring out flavors that you didn't really realize that were there. This True Blue is just an incredible, little corn whiskey. Save for the new American oak, it's used American oak, you would have bourbon on your hands. So it's just a qualification that it doesn't meet, and it never meant to. It's an update to Baby Blue, and it just sort of shows the continuity between these two whiskeys. This is sort of rich, buttery corn whiskey. This sort of becomes more caramel corn, more candy corn, and you start to get more mulling spices. So it behaves a lot more like bourbon. So anything like, Boulevardiers or Old Fashions, Manhattans, it really elevates any drink. And this little guy here is the 4-grain mash bourbon, and it really just does that too. It elevates anything that it goes into. Something that's incredible about this whiskey that I think is, generally with bourbon, I think you're often smelling sort of the barrel itself, so you're maybe smelling vanilla or you're smelling over-processed caramel. But this is a lot of butterscotch and pecan praline and brown sugar and baking spices. It's a beautiful whiskey on its own. The price point is incredible too, as you'll find when you go out there and buy each and every one of them. Where can people find these in San Francisco? In San Francisco, you can go to Healthy Spirits. There's 4 locations here. You can also go over to the Epicurean Trader and find it. But there, you can also go right down to our friends here at Soma Eats and see Fred. I know he would love to see you. And they've got some of our whiskeys there too. So what I do for this company, I work exclusively for Balcones. I've been with them for a year, but I manage all their accounts in Northern California. So my job, Monday through Friday and sometimes more, is driving around Northern California, whether it's as far up as Redding, Chico, down to Santa Cruz or over to Napa or down to Fresno. This is what I do throughout the week, telling people about this whiskey, selling this whiskey in better times, setting up cocktail programs and getting people inspired to create cocktails with them too.
Continuing from our theme from last night,
We did something last night? Oh, okay.
we had our show, and one of the things was, what are people's favorite sandwiches? What's your favorite sandwich?
What is my favorite sandwich? It might be a meatball sandwich. I don't know. Clearly, I'm not going to say it's vegan. Yeah, I like all sandwiches. I don't discriminate between sandwiches. I don't like Dijon mustard. I think it's wretched. But short of that, I like just about any other sandwich. Do you have something else that's just as whiskey related as sandwiches? Anything else that you'd like to know? I've known you guys for a long time. I love this place. I spent many bleary nights here back in the old days of the Juxtapose parties. Like I said, I've known Michelle as long as she worked across the street and then also worked here before she became one of the owners of this establishment. Alex, I've met more recently in the last couple of years. Dave, I've known for a good long time too. But again, this is one of those places. When I moved here in the mid-90s, when I say these sort of seminal institutions, this is what San Francisco represented to me when I first moved here in the mid-90s. And it's emblematic of what this city was and somewhat still is, but in more limited pockets. So things like this, places like this are really a treasure in San Francisco, sort of one of the old sirens that you can leave and come back and it's always so familiar. And it's an amazing home for local artists to showcase what they do, to make some money, and to have a cocktail and have a little bit of fun.
This may be putting you on the spot, but is there a
Why would you do that?
artist from over the years that you've seen here that is your favorite?
That's mean.
Question.
Yes, it's this one here that I think is lovely. She's got a lovely pink frock on and a shaved head. I've always enjoyed her work. I can't name any off the top of my head. Like I said, most of the times that I was here, I'd been drinking a lot. I used to come to the Juxtapose parties in the 90s was a huge thing. This was sort of where everybody came for nightlife in that way, and still do, and will. Once we sort of get to the other side of the universe, that I know everyone keeps bandying that phrase around. But when we get to that point, we'll open up. Anything else that I can add to that? No. Thank you again to 111 Minna for hosting me and letting me come in here and talk about Balcones. Thank you for your support over the years. And those of you out there able and willing, please donate to this wonderful, wonderful establishment to ensure that it keeps going. And it's part of the lifeblood of this city. I feel like I'm on a telethon now. It's like Jerry Lewis. Thank you so much for having me. Those are all the things that I'll say.